So we're going to spend a few minutes just asking this group, I'm going to ask a couple questions as the moderator, and then we'll open it up to questions in the audience, and we'll finish on time. So I guess the first question I'd have, I'm going to actually throw this out to Glenn, if I may. Tell us about some of the challenges that you had bringing a culture of first-party data where you had to connect CRM data and media data and digital data, and how you address those challenges, because I think that those are relevant for pretty much every advertiser in the space.
Sure. To start with, you need to go back about 5 years at EA. And EA was in a kind of in a state of flux. I don't know, how many of you know that EA was voted the worst company in America for 2 years running? Okay. I don't know if that says more about EA or Americans, but the truth is that when that sort of news hits a CEO's desk, there's an immediate sort of reaction. And that reaction is, we have to tell our players that we care. We have to tell our players that we understand. We have to tell our players that we're going to do better. And I'm sure that some of you have dealt with similar circumstances, probably nothing quite that drastic. But the net result was that EA pivoted very, very quickly to a position of what we call player first, right? And a lot of companies talk about being customer-centric, but we institutionally very, very rapidly said, we're going to be player first, and that's going to happen. And so after a number of conversations and all this other stuff, one of the things that we noticed is, like many other organizations at that time, a lot of that data was not federated. There's lots of silos of data that were all over the place. And the acknowledgement that in order for us to actually carry on intelligent dialogue with our players, we needed to understand our players better. And in order to be able to do that, we needed to federate our data. It's been a journey. We're still getting to the point where we're federating our data. It's been, since I've been in the organization, it's been 3 years of still finding data sources and normalizing them and all this other stuff, but it's a question of getting sort of institutional commitment from the top down that you're going to federate this data because there is good positive value in doing so.
Thank you. And Neil and Mark, it was mentioned that some verticals are stronger than others in first-party data. You see across a lot of different verticals and a lot of different clients. What are some of the areas that you see of strength?
If I start first, I think clearly I discussed a retailer, so they're definitely there. Telcos, financial services businesses, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with it. I think some businesses that are actually at the forefront of driving a lot of these initiatives are actually kind of the pure play e-commerce businesses. I think about our largest client, ASOS in the UK, for instance. They're strides ahead of many organizations we've encountered. They've embraced some of the things Glenn's been talking about around understanding customer, organizationally buying into all of these things, and they're taking the opportunity.
Yeah, if I could just add to that. So there are clearly businesses that have developed in the last 5 or so years where they're born with data at the core, right? So a lot of startup businesses, a lot of tech businesses, web-based businesses. But I refuse to believe there are no verticals for whom this isn't a solution. So one of the most advanced clients we have in the first-party data space at SMG is a CPG brand. And they have adopted a data-driven strategy. They've got institutional buy-in, and it's become part of their whole approach. So I refuse to believe that any vertical is outside of this approach.
So Pat, as a research guy and a syndicated research platform expert, do you see a world where traditional breaks go away and everything gets replaced by client-specific, first-party driven breaks?
That's a good question. I think in our case, really, we were sort of built for handling first-party data. So even though our biggest constituent groups are media companies and agencies, they bring the brands to us, and they want things driven by the first-party data. So I do see an evolution of that where, in our case, the mix of what is custom and syndicated is becoming a little bit blurred. That's why I said to me, it's dimension of measurement. The syndicated product actually has to move a lot closer to what everybody wants. It has to be very easy to bring in that first-party data. So I do see a movement in that direction. That's why we fit in so nicely with this conversation, with this panel. We do a little work for EA. We do work with your company as well. because there's always an element where you want some extra attitudinal, psychographic, brand affinity data that needs to be measured in a slightly different way. In some cases you have an incredibly holistic database that's got everything you need. But we still do a little work where we look at title-specific ways to message, game title-specific ways to message their clients. So there's always another way that a marketer is going to want an advantage or to have a better relationship with their consumer. And I think you're going to need the research to do that. So companies like ours have to pivot to do that. And so I do believe that that's the way forward in the next, probably in the next 2 to 3 years.
Gotcha. And Glenn, question for you. Who owns your data?
I own my data. And actually, this is, he kind of threw that one over the plate directly. The truth is that in order for us to be able to get to any sort of reasonable multi-touch attribution, whatever it is, because we buy through so many different disparate DSPs, the easiest way for us to aggregate all that data is to take all that data internally. And that's why when we talk about our DSP partners being willing to go ahead and share that data with us, we actually understand that journey very, very well, and it makes it much easier for us to aggregate all of those conversion events. And when we talk about conversion events, we're not just talking about sales, right? We have a set of metrics that we measure against that we consider to be success, and they're not all financial in nature to begin with, or at least not, not first approximation. And so getting people back into a game or retention or number of sessions, these are all things that are important to EA in order to be able to create good communities, in order to be able to improve our titles, in order to be able to do all of these other things. And so we want to see what that entire journey looks like. In order to be able to aggregate all of that data, because of the amount of telemetry that we have, it's largely not portable. We can't ship all this data to a third party and expect them to be able to leverage it in any meaningful way. And so we have to take all that data in-house and actually sort of curate that entire journey ourselves.
And to follow up to that, what are some of the data sources from different media where you have frustrations about getting that data?
That's not fair. There are parties that are less likely to share that data with us at an individual grain. I don't think I need to name names. It's a strategic discussion, right? For us, save one or two partners, everybody's providing that first-party data. Twitter's providing it, Google's providing it, Nanigans, Fixu, has offers. Like they all provide this data at an individual grain, and they're happy to share it. Now, the aggregation of that has some challenges, and there's some normalization problems and cleanliness and fraud and all these other things that you have to go with. But the net of it is that we know the vast majority of what that journey looks like at this point.
Great. So as we talk about data ownership, one of the things that we've seen happen in the industry is that if an advertiser is leveraging first-party data and they're activating against a publisher, against the publisher's first-party data and effectively joining the two, that fundamentally changes the relationship between the advertiser, the publisher, and the agency. So I'm going to throw it to Mark, the agency guy, to talk about that a little bit. How has that changed your relationships with publishers and advertisers, particularly now that the publishers and advertisers need to communicate?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So I think we're looking at an ecosystem that's very, very different now as a result of this change, right? And the widespread availability of first-party data and the ability to transact on that directly with the publisher, certainly. I think the role of the agency is twofold. One, the agencies that win long-term are the agencies that are able to adapt and adapt quickly, and they offer a range of services to clients, whether that's a full-service piece or not. I think I kind of mentioned the creative piece of this tangentially. We're seeing a lot of clients actually wish to move back to a completely full-service model where creative is part of the mix. I think the ability to offer objective expertise in a consultative fashion is a real strength of the agency, and I think brands are reliant on that. The pace of change in this industry with what's going on right now is wild. So even if a client opts to take their first-party media buying, maybe they're buying it programmatically in-house within their own walls, that's absolutely fine. The agency needs to adapt and figure out its service model.
So Neil, to add on to that question, Like, how many of your clients are actually doing this, are bringing first-party data in? Is this something that you see as becoming a commonplace? Is this still a novelty? Is this something that you see being the de facto way for moving forward?
Yes, very, very interesting question, right? I think it really does depend, and I'm not hedging by saying it depends on which market you're in. We got some progressed markets here, right, in terms of the US, we're looking at Europe. Other markets aren't embracing that model. When I reflect, probably 50% of our clients are taking a lot of these capabilities in-house. I think it actually makes us as an organization work even closely with the agency as well, because as they're adapting, we're adapting to a different model alongside them as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And back to you, Glenn. How do you see, as an advertiser, how do you see this relationship changing?
It's still a partnership, right? Fundamentally, we believe that our relationship with our agency is about a collaborative approach in how we deal with our media and how we plan and so on and so forth. While it's true that we have taken all of our programmatic in-house, they still provide volume for our fixed media. They still do our above the line. There's still a bunch of stuff that we expect our agency to do, but we work together in order to be able to create our buying strategies and so on and so forth.
Great. So I want to save a minute or two for questions. So I'm going to ask each of the four of you to make a big, bold prediction about the future of first-party data, and we're going to record it, and we're going to mock you in 3 years if you're wrong. So with that, please.
Okay, yeah. So I think the rise in first-party data is going to fundamentally change the way that media deals are transacted. I think it's going to change the currency, and I think it's going to change the trading models. The increase in attribution and performance means that we can now conduct trades based on business outcomes. I think that's going to completely change the trading model in the coming years.
Okay, so I'll go next. I think my bold prediction for the rise of first-party data is that there will be I think in the next, let's say 2 years, a major merger between a market research firm and a data technology company, big data company, that allows a pendulum swing to data quality over quantity, so a lot of transparency. Did this work? Did it not work? And I think there's going to be there's a lot of players out there, especially in the US. I think we'll see a major merger that will, I think, point to a movement towards data quality in the use of first-party data.
Thank you. Glenn?
I think that you'll see a large uptick in the number of advertisers who want to own all of their data. I think you'll see, particularly in the media event space, and I think you'll start seeing that desire to have that data exert as pressure against media properties that can't provide it. I think you'll see a downtick in amount of spend for companies that won't provide that data.
And Neil?
Thank you. Look, when you look at everything that's going on, we're talking about first-party data, and it's about people, it's about resolving both data and identity. As things are progressing, it's basically going to mean that the pure-play media DMPs in the marketplace become defunct. So without the pivot required to really embrace new techniques and less reliance on third-party data, the current media DMPs won't exist.
Yeah. Thank you. Bold predictions. So we have time for 2 questions before we wrap it up. So if anyone has a question, please. Anyone? Question? Yes, I believe you, sir, the one with the elbow up like this.
No? Okay. All right. This is a question for the panel. Thanks for your comments. Clearly, building your first-party data is a journey. It takes some time. And any such initiative in an organization is better done where you can show value extraction as you go along the journey. So if you think about the value streams, is it primarily in the early stages? Is it primarily through cost savings? Because I can use my first-party data to target advertising and messages? Or is it more skewed towards cross-selling, upselling, and those kinds of opportunities, revenue?
if I understand, I'll play that back for folks that can't quite hear it. He wants to know what he's right in saying that whenever you go over a long journey, you need to start showing sort of success metrics along the way. You can't just have people wait for 3 years and then say, don't worry, it's coming in 3 years. You need to show value along the way. The answer is that you can start extracting value sort of immediately, right? Just by knowing what our user journey is, I can tell you that by understanding clearly what that user journey is and shifting from a last touch attribution model to a multi-touch attribution model, and then actually understanding the exact point of transaction and so on and so forth, we've been able to completely remove our media buying for anybody who's already converted. And I know that that sounds like kind of obvious, but the truth of the matter is that unless you have that data, it's impossible to do.
So we are getting the official signal that we are out of time. So we're going to be available up here for questions. We would be happy to chat out there. I'd like to thank the panel for this. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience. Thank you.